Hi everyone. So today I'm going to go over 13-2 with you. Angles in the unit circle. I want to spend a little more time than usual on this because it's a completely new section. So we're going to be working with trigonometry. So the first things we need to understand is measurements, right? So how do we measure these angles? So important thing to know, we're talking about standard position here. So standard position means you start right here on the x-axis, okay? And then you rotate either counterclockwise or clockwise. If you're going counterclockwise, it's in the positive direction. So you're starting at 0, you're going to go to 90, 180, 270, then 360. So for example, if I start here and go to there, that's 135 degrees. Okay. Also, you can go in the other direction, clockwise. If you start with this one, if you start at 0 here, and you're going clockwise, where you go, now it's negative now, however. So we start 0, we go 90 degrees, negative 180, negative 270, and back again to negative 360. So for example, with this angle right here, right, I'm starting at 0, I'm going negative 60 degrees. So be aware of that. The other thing you need to be aware of, and it's really important for this section, is how your special right triangles connect with everything. So you need to remember these. You need to be familiar with the 30, 60, 90 triangle and the 45, 45, 90 triangle. And if you recall, for the 30, 60, 90, the sides will always have a constant proportion, okay? So if you have the side opposite 30 degrees is always 1, the side opposite the 60 degrees is a square root of 3, the side opposite the hypotenuse is always 2. 45, 45, 90 is pretty simple, harder to make a mistake here. With the 45, 45, 90, the sides opposite the 45s are always, for example, 1. And the side opposite the 90-degree angle is always going to be the square root of 2 relative to the 45. So you can multiply it by a square root of 2. So in 45, 45, 90, these two sides are always going to be the same. And this is going to be important. Being familiar with these is going to be very important moving forward and looking at our trig functions, because trig functions are based on triangles. So let's look at some problems over here. So if we look at number 7 here, okay, so notice what's going on. I'm rotating in this direction here. Oops, I didn't want to draw on that. Erase that. Undo. Okay, so I took the pointer. So I'm going in this direction, which means it's going to be a clockwise or negative angle. How much, though? So if I think about it, there's going to be, starting at 0, there's negative 90, negative 180, negative 270. And I'm going past that a certain amount. So I'm going to be greater than negative 270, but how much? So the point, you have to look at the point to figure this out. And basically, how much you go past it is always going to be 30, 45, or 60 degrees, right? Since we're using those special right triangles. You look at this point, you see it's 2 and 2. If I draw a little triangle there, what type of triangle does that correspond to? Well, if I'm at 2 and 2, that means that basically this side of the triangle is 2, that side of the triangle is 2. Well, again, if they're the same, it's got to be a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So I know I'm 45 degrees past. So I add, or subtract, 45 degrees from the 270. So 270 plus 45 is, 300 and... Let's check my notes here. Yeah, it's negative 315. Negative 315 degrees. Okay. It's 270 plus 45. Okay. Next, let's look at number 9. This one going in the opposite direction, so it's going to be a positive angle. There's 90, there's 180. How much past 180? Again, my choices are 30, 45, or 60 degrees. You can probably tell just by looking, it's greater than, it's going to be the biggest one possible, or 60 degrees. The other way you can tell is you look at the digits. You see you have that square root of 3. Anytime you see that square root of 3 going on, you know you're going to be dealing with a 30, 60, 90 degree triangle. And in this case, you can kind of see and look at it intuitively. And you can kind of see if you draw, a little triangle there. Well, you can tell the angle right there, this is the small angle, that has to be the 30. That one's the bigger one at 60. So I'm going to need to add 60 onto 180. So this is a 240 degree angle. Let's look at 11. So with 11 here, so again, I'm going in what direction? Clockwise. So this can be a negative angle. How much? Well, again, I see my friend here, the square root of 3. Okay, square root of 3 means it's got to be a 30, 60, 90. If it was a 45, 45, what's going to happen is that these two numbers always have to be the same magnitude, right? Not true in this case. All right, we have 2 square root of 3, negative square root of 2. It's got to be a 30, 60, 90. If we look at draw a little triangle here. Let's see here. Always draw it to the x-axis. Well, I can pretty clearly see that this angle right here, that's got to be a 30. Okay, so but it's got to be a negative 30 because we're going clockwise. Okay. So let's look at 2 more problems. Number 13, number 15. 13, sketch each angle in standard position. So you need to draw a 40-degree angle. You don't have to be, if you have a protractor, you can draw it up precisely, but 40 degrees is going to be right about there, right? 40 degrees. Not quite to the halfway point. 15, negative 270. Okay, negative is clockwise, and 270 is right out there. So that's a negative 270 degrees. So those are pretty easy. For the next section, for example, 19 and 21, they ask you to find the measure of an angle between 0 and 360 degrees coterminal with each given angle. Coterminal means it's basically, if you punch it into the calculator, it's equivalent to each other. So for example, 0 and 360 are coterminal with each other because basically you end up in the same place. So what you have to do here is you have to add and subtract 360 degrees from these numbers until you get something that's between 0 and 360 degrees. So if we look at this one, we got 575. Well, we're too high, so I'm going to subtract 360 degrees. Okay, so you do that math, you punch it into your calculator, 575 minus 360, and you get 215 degrees. And you're done. That's that easy. Okay, let's look at 21. 21 here, negative 356. Well, we're going to have to add. So we're going to add here 360 degrees. And what is that? That's 4 degrees. Okay, and we're done. You can stop once you're between 0 and 360 degrees. So that's all you got to do. Add and subtract 360 until you get something that you're looking for. Now let's take a look at the unit circle. Okay, unit circle. I'll leave the triangles up there since we're going to need them. So the unit circle is basically, well, it's a circle, first off, but is used for trigonometry. The unit circle is a circle with a radius of 1. Okay, so you got on the x-axis here, This point is 1, 0. Got another point up here, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 1. And the special thing about the unit circle is that every point on this circle can be turned into the trig values of cosine and sine. In particular, the x value is cosine, the y value is always going to be sine. Okay? So, for example, if I look at this angle right here at 1, 0, that is it's an angle of, if we're at 1, 0, that's an angle of 0 degrees, right? And so right here, that's at, obviously the point is 1, 0. So the trig value at that point for cosine, well, cosine will be 1, sine will be 0. If we move in this direction, if we go here, that's 90 degrees to get to here. Well, right here, the cosine is 0, sine is 1. We go 180 degrees to right here, cosine is negative 1, sine is 0, and so on and so forth. So, we can use this property to answer the questions from 26 to 33. Okay, so let's look at number 26. So they want you to find the exact values of cosine and sine of each angle. And by exact, that they're meaning don't use your calculator. So you should be able to do this without using your calculator. You just have to use special right triangles. So quick note on those. Since we're talking about the unit circle, okay, that means a radius of 1, right? So if we're looking at our special right triangles, they don't have 1 here. So I have to turn these into a 1. So for example, the 30, 60, 90 triangle, how do I make a 2 into a 1? Well, I divide by 2, right? 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I have to do that to the other sides as well. So the 1, I divide it by 2 to get 1/2. The square root of 3, also I divide it by 2 to get square root of 3 over 2. You have to do something similar for the 45, 45, 90 triangle, right? So as it is right now, this kind of in the normal 45, 45, 90, you have a square root of square root of 2 for the hypotenuse. We need a 1. So we have to divide by the square root of 2. So we do 1 divided by the square root of 2. That's not standard form though. So when you see your answers in the back of the book, you need to turn it into standard form. So we're going to multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. And so when you check your answers, you should always see, instead of 1 over the square root of 2, you'll see square root of 2 over 2. All right, and that's going to be the same for both of these. Okay. So when you're finding the trig values, your answers will always be either 1/2, square root of 3 over 2, square root of 2 over 2, or if you're on, one of these axes here, it's going to be either 1 or 0 as well. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these problems. So with 26 here, so it says negative 60 degrees. Okay, so automatically you're working with a 30, 60, 90 triangle. You just have to figure out what those values are going to be in this particular case. So negative 60 degrees means you're going to be right here, right? So I'm going to I always draw a little triangle. So if I draw a little triangle, draw it up to the x-axis there. Well, if I look at that triangle, where's my 30 and where's my 60 going to be? Well, I can clearly see from the picture that this is the small angle right here. That is the bigger angle right there. So there's my 30 degree side. That's for my x. Here's my 60 degree side. That will be for my y. Okay, so what are my answers now? Let's think about this. Oops, better to draw. So, again, looking over here, looking back up at my triangle here, so I can see the x, again, is opposite the 30-degree angle. So that's going to be the smaller one. All right, so that's going to be 1/2. All right, so that's my answer there. 1/2. The other one, the y, is opposite the 60 degrees. And what is that going to be? Well, it looks like it's going to be square root of 3/2. Okay? But where you got to be a little bit careful is you need to check which quadrant you are in. Okay, what quadrant we are in. Because for these x and y values, obviously if you're in the first quadrant, both will be positive. If you're in the second quadrant, the x will be negative, y will be positive. This one, both are negative. Fourth, final quadrant, which is where we are in this problem, what we're going to have is this is going to be positive, and the y, I'll clean that up a bit, erase that. The y will be, so we're going to have positive x, negative y, okay, which is what we have in this case. So that means this y will be a negative square root of 3/2. Okay, let's look at 27. So with 27, I'm drawing a picture here. You should always be drawing a picture for these. So negative 135, okay, puts you to over here. Again, I drew a little triangle. I went from the point, drew it down, okay, and negative 135 is 45 degrees past the 90 degrees. So I'm going to be dealing with a 45, 45, 90 triangles. Those are easy. It's hard to make a mistake here because your answer for your cosine and sine is always going to be square root of 2/2. Okay? And you just have to figure out what's positive, what's negative. So again, if I think about this, put it back to draw. Remember, x is cosine. So again, sorry, going back again. That 1/2 is your cosine of theta. That negative square root of 3/2 is your sine of theta. Okay, so for this one, number 27, I have to figure out the x and y again, which is your cosine and sine values. If I think about it, well, they both have to be square root of 2/2. The x, in this case, if I look, I'm in the second quadrant. The x, which is the cosine, is going to be negative. So it's going to be negative square root of 2/2. Y is positive, so that's going to be positive square root of 2/2. So my cosine is negative square root of 2/2. Sine is positive square root of 2/2. One more. Let's do 29. So 29, I'm drawing out this angle, negative 240. So with that negative 240, I'm starting here, rotating all the way around, and I go 60 degrees past that negative 180. So that means it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle going on in there. And I see the x is going to be, so there's the 60 right there. The 30 is right there. So the x is opposite the 30. The y is opposite. Now I'll just draw that in real quick. Here's my, the x is going to be right there. The y is going to be right there, right? So the x is going to be opposite the 30. So I think about that. Well, what's going back to my triangle again? That's 1/2, right? But it's in the third quadrant, so it's going to be negative 1/2. The y is opposite the 60, so that's the square root of 3/2. But again, third quadrant, so it's negative. So my cosine value is going to be negative 1/2. My sine value is the negative 3 over the square root of 2. Okay, well, I hope this was helpful. I know this is going to be a little bit difficult when you're first learning it, so feel free to ask me any questions, okay, and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thank you very much.